Okay, everyone. I'm gonna try and So we're gonna learn some. We're gonna learn to do grading. So we need to demystify the grade node and the color correction nodes in Nuke. I need to just understand some basic principles in stuff. So forgive me if some of you know all of this already, or it's stating the obvious in some cases, but it's good to be able to visualize how the colors and levels of color in Nuke and in all the softwares really use the same processes. Whether it's Photoshop, After Effects, DaVinci, Baselight. You sort of need to know this stuff if you're going to be working with the with computer graphics. So this diagram is just a simple showing, this could be like an RGB image. So RGB is like 3 channels, red, green and blue, that combine together. If they're all 0, you get black. If they're all at 1 or at 255, depending on what your value system is, they're going to be white. Okay. So in Nuke is generally using the values 0 to 1 for most things, but in RGB the 0 would be 0, 0, 0 for red, 0s for green, 0s for blue, and at the top end, at the white end, it would be 255 for each. Okay, that's like 8-bit color. With 16-bit, 32-bit, these can go into thousands, but we're just considering those combinations, making up our every conceivable color and combination up from visible black to visible white. Now, because whites could go into super whites. This is as visible as our eye can see, but obviously that value could be more than 1. It could keep going to 1.5, 2 higher, because if you're pulling the contrast up or down, it means that would stay white until it got to down to the value of 1, and then it would start to become a grey or something. And the same with the other end. You can have things come out of the darkness that you can't even see at the start. If you've got a high dynamic range image, the HDR image, it could have information in the black that you can't see that has been recorded, and the same in the white areas. You can pull back stuff down, but this is our visible range. So along this axis is the range, and this axis is the value from 0 to 1. So logically, the center there is half of 255 or half of 1.5. Okay, so a grey pixel is 0.5. That's a mid-grey. That's middle of the line there. So, in general terminology, for grading, the mid-tones are the middle ones, shadows are down the bottom end, highlights are in the top end. Now, these numbers are fairly arbitrary. Actually, it's probably more accurate to say 0.33 is the shadows up to 0.33, and that would mean they were equally divided into 3, and then it would be 0.66 to 1 would be the highlights. But you can actually set these values when you're color correcting. You can look at an image and decide which sort of range is your middle area and which is your shadows. It depends how it's been filmed in many ways. So you might want to, if it's been filmed at quite high, quite overexposed, you might want to set your shadows into a larger area than they would normally be. But just get used to the terminology of these, right? So yeah, 0.33 would be in RGB would be what? It would be 90 or 80, and then maybe 180, and then 255. So when you one of the most common functions is gamma. Basically, gamma is a grading node which only affects the middle range. So when you do gamma, whether it's up, increasing the gamma, making things brighter, or bending it the other way to make things darker, it always leaves 0 and 1 alone. It's kind of locked on at those ends, like a rubber band, and you're just bending all of the middle colours. It does affect all of them apart from black or white. But it falls off towards black and white, affects them less. So you're really pulling the contrast or darkening, depending which way you pull the gamma. Here is, so this is a constant just set to 0.5. This is a mid-grey, right in the middle. And if you pull the gamma, it gets brighter. If you pull it down, it gets darker. Okay. If I plug that grade into, is this the right one? Sorry, into. So this is a ramp that is white at the top and black at the bottom. You see, pulling our gamma affects pretty much everything, but you can see at the very top it's still white all the way through, and the very bottom it stays black even if it gets really close. It leaves that bottom line alone. Okay, so that's the gamma. It affects the mid-tones, and it falls off towards the peak highlight and peak base light. So that diagram is just showing how we've pulled the gamma, and it's pulled the mid-tone of 0.5 up to 0.6. In your gamma, the setting is set to 1. So to get that grey that's in my drawing, it probably have to pull it to maybe like 1.2 or something to get. Now you can look at that, and it's you get the information down the bottom here. So it's telling you that it's now 0.56. 0.56. You see this the red, green, and blue numbers there. So that's pulled it from 0.5 to 0.56. So that's a gamma of 1.22. Okay, so the same deal occurs with all three colours. So 000 is black, whatever colour you're in. But as you start ramping up just one channel, in this case the red channel, you get to peak red. So that's the pure red at that end. It's got no green, no blue in it. So that's a pure red. So this is just, so if you imagine this is made up of 3 lines, the red, green and blue. This is just looking at one of them. Oh God, sorry, I jumped. This is just the red with a value. The other two don't have value. In fact, they should be flat down here, and I think they are in a later drawing. Oops. Let's sneak preview. You'd have to take it in that fast. Okay, if we introduce a blue channel with a value of 150, so going up the slide is the amount of colour. So at 150 of blue, it changes our red to a magenta. Okay, and this is how it would read if you analysed it as RGB: 255, 0 on the green, and 150 in the blue. If you put in a green channel at 200, it goes to this sort of horrible yellow colour. All three are still set to 0 at the bottom end, so they stay black. The top end, because they're not all 255. It's not white anymore. It's dropped down, and the mix has made this yellow colour. So. Red and greens make yellows, reds and blues make magenta, green and blue, cyan. So there's another visualization of that first image in a way, where it's made up of all three colours. Okay, so if you perform a gamma on just one of the channels, your mid-grey there, as represented by this thing here, has had the red pulled up to 200. So mid-grey was 127, 127, 127. That's there. When you perform gamma on just one channel, by in this case increasing it to 200, your mid-grey becomes a sort of pinky colour, yeah, because you're injecting in the red. So we can perform a grade. We can perform a gamma pull on that grey just by clicking on the 4. So you opened up the channels, and then just here in the red gamma, we just pull up the red gamma channel. So that's at 2 actually. That's double. The value of 2. It gets a sort of pink tinge to it. So here's our first diagram again of the RGB channels going from 0 to 1. And just to explain, the value is that way. So, so black, dark grey, mid grey, light grey, white. Okay, the range is like the visible spectrum. You know, like you can, if you imagine. So, the range when you're using these numbers is kind of binary. It's like it's 0 or 1 and everything in between. Okay. With the RGB system, it's 0 and 255 is the range, okay, because that's an 8-bit computing data. It could be that you could say that the visible spectrum is a range as well, the human eye of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, yeah, and it's what you can. It's like the minimum you can see with the naked eye, and the maximum you can see. That's a range. And you know, some animals can see into the infrared and even further into the ultraviolet spectrum, so their range is wider than ours. And when we, well, I'll get to it, but I'll show you the differences and how they're affected when you're grading in those two things, the value and the range. But that's what we have on this on our graphs that we're editing. And you may have actually seen these. Have I got? Have you seen? I don't know if you ever use the color graphs to color correct in Photoshop or in After Effects. I mean, there are lots of ways to do color correction in After Effects. I imagine most people just pull the sliders that say contrast and luminance and stuff like that. But you can actually open those up and tweak the red, green and blue channels directly in a similar way. So I'm going to go through the different properties that exist in the grade node. Basically, the one at the top of the one at the top of the grade node is called black point. Okay, and that's basically going to if you start off with your normal, that's the previous frame that we saw. That one. Oh gosh, I've gone right back to the start. Sorry. Where am I? If you pull the range that direction, it's going to sort of narrow our total range that we have to look at, right? Which has the effect of, if I'm looking at the right one. I'm pulling the keys on the wrong grade node, sorry. No, it didn't do anything. Oh, sorry, I was looking at the other channel. Okay, yeah, so pulling the black point as so if you look at this ramp as you imagine this is your full range of black through to white. Changing the black point is basically narrowing the range, so making your black point start higher up. So now your range is just from here to here, black to white. Okay. The white point is the opposite. It's bringing the range in from the top instead. So this is our image where the black point has been raised, and now we're going to lower our white point, and now our range is just this narrow range in the very middle, from black to white. Okay. So lift has the opposite effect. This is actually not affecting your range, but it's affecting the values. So a positive lift will make your blacks will increase the bottom end of your. Okay, and a negative lift decreases them, but it leaves the peak white alone. Okay. A gain and multiply are a bit like plus and screen. They affect the other end. They brighten things. If you're looking at the ramp and you turn up the gain, it's affecting the white end of the spectrum, not the bottom end at all. Okay. Multiply does pretty much the same thing. Okay, so lift is for the raising or lowering the darker colours and shades. Gain and multiply will affect the upper end. And white point and black point change the scope of the range that you're actually putting values into. And finally, offset. Offset is like lift, but it lifts everything. It lifts the bottom and so it would drop top ends and everything in a parallel line. It would just like it'll either raise the bar on both ends of your graph or lower them both. So it's got a better name than lift, because lift could actually lower as well as lift. Because if you go into minus, a lift is actually lowering color values, but offset is a better name. So the offset will make both it will just basically make the whole bar move up and down. The white and the black, peak white and peak black will go up and down. And the last one in the grade is gamma, which I already showed you. Is just that's the one that bends your lines and affects the whole middle area, but leaves your black and white points where you've taken them to with the other nodes. So this will affect everything in the middle between your black and white, and that's the one you're going to use mostly, really, with for a lot of things. So the other main grading tool is the color corrector. Now this is like the precision color corrector, really. And if you've sort of got the principles, the other principles that I would just told you about, then the color correct basically can affect each third of the line that you have independently. It has all three the shadows, midtones, and highlights can all be affected independently of each other. So you can do a gamma on the shadows, you can do a lift on the midtones, you can do a gamma and an offset in the highlights, and all three of them will combine to sort of to change your image that you're working on. Okay. So, for instance, you might do 3 separate functions on the line, which will change everything. It will change your black level to dark grey, maybe. It might change your mid-tone and raise it quite a bit. It might bring down your white level to a sort of pale grey. It's much more flexible than a simple grade. And it doesn't obviously it affects all three, RG and B, if you want to split them up. So this, for instance, could make a color grade which you might run across a whole movie or a whole sequence. And this is basically what a lookup table is. I mean, it's just a sort of palette that has been pre-selected and then can be applied to every piece of footage in the same way. So these curves would represent a particular grade that you've decided on, and this particular grade is in the shadows. It's high on red and low on blue, so it gives a sort of warm, dark, brownish colour down in the bottom end, where the darkest points of the film that you have, and midway, it's fairly neutral still, but it's slightly warmer because the red is higher than the blue than average in the middle tone, and so between this grey and this brown is this kind of mid-brown colour somewhere here in our graph. And towards the top end, the blue is pulled up quite dramatically, and the reds are dropped. So we have a blue sort of tint to everything in the highlights of this particular grade. Okay. Oh. So when you check your footage, you can actually allocate where the shadow range is, which is the mid-range, which is the highlights. So you may decide to push the mid-range past the middle section that is default to a sort of to a higher end. So that's another visualization of the color red. So yeah, it's full red at that end, 255, zero value green, 0 value blue. Mid range of that red between black and red is red 172, 0, 0, and green and blue. So this is a gamma node adjust, which would color correct the mid-range, would color correct from grey to this yellow color. Did anyone follow that? Because Can anyone tell me what colour that grade would make there in the centre? Have a guess. No? It's taking out the red, it's lowering the red, but the green and the blue are pulled high. So this will actually make the centre a little bit brighter than it is already. Yeah, it's going to make a kind of a bright cyan colour in the centre. Yeah, you can see it's the gamma node is doubled in blue, so we've got twice as much blue, and we've got 1.5 more green than we had before. The only one where we lost any was in the red, and that's been pulled quite dramatically down. So that would make a kind of a cyan grade. What do you think? What about this one? If you look at the lines in general, every single line is below where it was. The default is straight line. So is that going to make a bright colour or a darker colour? It's going to darken down to dark red. Yeah? It's got half of its original red value, so that's going to be darkish red, but it's still got a little bit of red, green and blue, but it's had a lot of them taken out, so it's going to be a dark red. That one's that's a blue. Pretty much. What colour's this one? All I've given you is these things, right? They've all been taken down. The default is 1 in the gamma node, right? So yeah, it's a green. It's a dark green. It's got half of its original green value, but the red and the blue have been pulled down really low. So that would be a dark green, sort of green there, and everything else way down. Any ideas what the numbers would be? So red is 1. The gamma node's default at 1. Yeah. So green is like 1.5 or something, and the blue would be like maybe 2, something like that. Yeah. Can anyone tell me what the numbers would be for orange? What would be the highest value for orange? Yeah, red. So red might be like pulled up to 2 or something, and then green might be like 1.5, and blue would be like non-existent. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's what it looks like. All right, cool. Well, hopefully that makes some sense, and you can sort of see what's going on when you're pulling the levels around in grade or color correction. Obviously, when we're using floating points, these lines actually continue off the scales, and then you can grade them way down back into the scale of visibility if need be. But concludes that, I suppose.